Thank you all for coming back for part 2 of this afternoon on cycling in the lab. We've got Sidsel Birk Hjuler, is that right? Hjuler, sorry. She's told me 10 times how to pronounce this and I've still made a mistake. With her master's degree in art, Sidsel has been specialising in urban and aesthetics. Her speciality in urban bicycle culture, and she has been working with projects that also represent different angles in urban bicycle planning. In addition to being a bicycle sociologist of the Copenhagenize consulting team, Sidsel has been working in the communications department of the European Cyclists Federation and has been an external lecturer on American and European city bicycle sociology. Currently, she's spending her time on a study that tries to measure the effects of bicycle marketing. So I'm really, really pleased that Sidsel has come here today from Copenhagen, and I'd like you to welcome her in the normal welcoming way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here to this interesting lab where you are discussing solutions for problems and challenges of urban life. With more than half of the world's population living in urban areas in the moment, this seems like a pretty interesting issue to discuss. As a part of the Copenhagenize team, I've been asked to come here today and talk about what we're doing. And we're doing a lot of different things, but today I'm going to talk about 2 specific things. One is the blog Cycle Chic, and the other one is the Copenhagenize Index of the top 20 most bicycle-friendly cities that we made last year, 2012. In that index, Berlin is rated number 5, and in the end I'm going to talk a little more about why that is, and what is good and what could be done better. But I'm going to start with Cycle Chic, because this is kind of the block that started it all. Oh, and I see it's the old presentation that it's fine. We'll figure it out. But this block is kind of what started it all, and it's the aesthetic philosophy behind all the work that Copenhagenize have been doing ever since. Cycle Chic today is a worldwide network of blogs covering cities from Vancouver to Vienna and Bogota to Berlin. And if it had been right, you would see all the blocks, but you'll see that later. And every year there's a new city blogger joining in the Cycle Chic Republic. But to explain what the Cycle Chic is about, I have to go back to the beginning, to 2006, when Michael Colville Anderson, who was a photographer and filmmaker at the time and now is the founder of both Cycle Chic and Copenhagenize. A Monday morning in 2006, he was going to work with his camera, as always. And this particular morning, he thought the light was just beautiful. So he took this picture, and he put it up on Flickr and was just waiting for his Flickr friends from all over the world to praise the beautiful light in this picture. And I guess these people saw the light, but it was not really the light Michael was talking about. It was these people in their normal clothing going to work on bikes. They were so amazed about that this was really happening. And this was what was fascinating to them, not the light. Michael was really caught off guard because he had never really thought that this was something special. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. You don't really think about taking a picture of it and celebrating that you have good teeth. So he had never thought about why this should be fascinating, or that it was fascinating that he and his fellow citizens were going to work in normal clothing every day on a bike. And when you look at history, it is kind of puzzling why people from all over the world were so amazed about these pedaling people. Because this is nothing new. Less than a century ago, you could find beautifully composed pictures of pedaling people from everywhere in the world. From Australia to Austria, USA to the USSR. These people were part of a bicycle culture that I would call the bicycle culture 1.0. Yeah, and I guess, I don't know if Elvis really fit in, but he's my big hero, and I just thought he looked so goddamn hot on that bike, so he had to beautify my presentation somehow. The Russians ain't too bad either. Yeah, I must apologize in advance. My presentation might tend to have a little more cycle chic men than women. I'll try to make it up for you. But okay, where were I? Good. So why do I call this the bicycle culture 1.0? Well, it's because something happened. Elvis got fat, and motorized machines that were made for far, far distances jammed themselves into small cities the way Elvis jammed his big body into very tight jeans. Modern man called this machine by names like freedom and the future. So why is it that I call it the children's disease of modern city life? Well, it's because every city seems to have gone through this period. Every city seems to have experienced what a subversive influence a machine can have on a city's life and resources. It's like something they just had to go through, like a children's disease in a childhood of modern life and technology. What Michael had taken a picture of, without even knowing it himself, was a city that was recovering. And the city had found out that sometimes that good old pal that you thought was boring in the beginning might be your best friend in the long run. But Copenhagen, as well as so many other cities, like Münster and Bremen, Hanover in Germany, had forgotten to tell about this. They had forgotten how awesome this was actually, And they really had forgotten to tell that they had a new bicycle culture. A bicycle culture that I call 2.0 because it's a bicycle culture that is familiar with the car, and it uses it too. But in the city, it just simply finds the bicycle the most convenient mode of transportation. What Cycle Chic is all about is documenting and telling the story of this bicycle culture and these people. So who are these people? What's their relationship to the bicycle? Well, as un-chic as it might sound, their relationship to the bicycle is kind of similar to how they feel about their vacuum cleaner. And why is that? Well, it's because they don't really feel any need to dress up when they use it. It's not a part of their unique identity either. However, they know damn well that the sooner the better. You want your kids to learn to use this thing. They don't really talk or brag about this thing either. Unless, of course, it's one of them new fancy ones. But we all know that these people that keep talking about it are kind of annoying. So we try to keep it low. What the relationship they have to this bicycle is I simply couldn't live without it love. Because it makes their life easier. And because after they've used it, they feel great. So Cycle Chic is about documenting the beauty of easy living and normality. Cycle Chic is about documenting the bicycle culture 2.0, the rise of a new generation, the rise of a modern urban mobile man of the 21st century. And even though Cycle Chic started in Copenhagen, this man is on the rise all over the world. Oh yeah, and of course the woman too. What's so great about these people is that they're not crazy environmentalists. They're not health freaks either. And they're not mad anarchist teenagers. They're just normal people minding their own business on a bike, not thinking about the fact that they are actually changing the environment or saving the environment, making themselves healthier, and changing society for the better. These people's attitude is the most valuable currency for cities that wants to invest in more sustainable solutions and in their livability. But how do you create more people with this attitude? What's the vaccine? Or can you learn anything from Copenhagen? These are the questions. So, here it was. These are all the blocks that are part of the Cycle Chic Republic so far. But the questions asked, how do you make more people? That's what we discussed on the block Copenhagenize, which was created in 2007. The block covers all issues from helmet promotion, to sperm banks, to infrastructure and marketing. Everything that could have something to do with making more people cycle. And after we've been discussing this and blocking about this for almost 4 years, we felt a need to figure out what cities were actually doing the best job right now. To kind of understand, have a better understanding of best practices and get a status of how these cities were actually doing all over the world. So we decided to pick, we decided to pick 80 cities from all over the world, 80 major cities, and by major we mean 700,000 inhabitants or more. And this is what the index ended up looking like. This is a Copenhagenize Index of the top 20 most bicycle-friendly cities of 2011. And here you see Berlin is ranked number 5. And as some of you sharp minds out there might notice, Copenhagen and Portland are actually too small to be in the index, but we've included them anyways. And why is that? Well, Copenhagen, for a company called Copenhagenize, it would feel pretty stupid not to rate your own city. And Portland is because we were kind of curious how the supposedly best bicycle-friendly city of North America would actually rank in our index. So even though it wasn't really the plan to publish this, we decided to go public with it anyways. And it's because we started to think that this might be interesting to others than just ourselves. The first reason for that is it might be interesting for this little feller and his generation to know what city would be the best place to become a good citizen cyclist. What places were good enough to make him feel safe? And this is actually Michael's little cute son, Felix. Secondly, if you see it through the eyes of Felix, the index might look very similar to the characteristics of a game. A game has values, rules, challenges, feedback, and goals. And the same does the index. Values, for example. You can apply values to the criteria we set for the index. And the criteria were broken down into 13 categories, where we measured 13 categories we thought were inevitable to be able to measure true bicycle friendliness. Rules, well, it has to be a major city. And 2, the major city can score from 0 to 4 points in each category. And as in many other good games, there are jokers. And here they come as bonus points, which can come as maximum 12 bonus points for a particular impressive effort or result. Well, the challenge is, of course, that it is a contest. But it's not a contest for only the big and heavy players. It's also a contest for the small and quick movers, as you might see later. The feedback is, of course, the index in itself. And it's also the summary we've made for each city, where we give it a little pat on the back and a little kick in the ass of what you could do better. The goals should be quite clear. It's to become the most bicycle-friendly city in the world. But before walking you through these 13 criteria, I would like to quote a professor in game science from the University of Washington. The promise of games is not that they will allow people to do some task that's relatively easy for them. It's that they can adapt and solve problems that originally even themselves didn't know they were capable of. And this is also the idea behind the index. The first criterion of the index is based on the political and social influence the NGOs have in the city. Berlin got ADFC, for example, and amazing events like the Sternfahrt. Hungary, for example, in general, has some very visionary advocacy. They have some truly funny and very good campaigns that you should definitely check out. Also, Guadalajara has pretty amazing activism. And what's interesting about this activism is that they focus on trying to make it mainstream, not to be a subculture. And they do that, for example, by making a lot of DIY infrastructure, do-it-yourself infrastructure. Next criterion is bicycle culture. And as you might have found out by now, bicycle culture is a very big thing for the Copenhagenize team. Here we rate the city from a culture consisting of only lonesome sporty cyclists. Often they wear spandex or lycra. And to a bicycle culture that is public property. Everybody does it. This is where only Copenhagen and Amsterdam have gotten 4 points. And Amsterdam got 2 bonus points here for just being so exceptional. Number 3 is bicycle facilities. And here we've been looking at accessible bike racks, ramps on stairs, as you see here, space allocated on trains and buses, well-designed wayfinding, etc. So we rated it from no bicycle facilities at all to widespread and innovative facilities. And talking about innovative, Tokyo is really an interesting example. They have bike parking at train station where it's a robot that will take your bike, take it down underground, and be able to give it back to you within 10 seconds. Usually there's videos online on this. It's really crazy. Number 4 is bicycle infrastructure, and this is also a very important factor. So we rated from no infrastructure to high-level, safe, separated cycle tracks. And separated cycle tracks is something we really believe in. Again, of course, it's Copenhagen and Amsterdam that really scores high. But cities like Berlin and Barcelona as well is also getting good credits. Bikes, oh, yeah? Yeah. So every criterion we rate from 0 to 4, and what we have been doing is talking with urban planners from all the cities, and also advocacy groups, and you know all the contexts we've been using to gather all this information. Of course, a lot of this is numbers, but that we've been looking at too. So of course, like the almost 900 kilometers of bicycle infrastructure, yes, you get credit for that in Berlin, definitely. Bicycle facilities was something different, but there's a lot of bike racks in Tokyo too, so yeah. So, but it was just to give an example of like how innovative you can think. But yeah, we look all, and it's not just like, okay, they have a robot, they don't have anything else. They have a lot more than that in Tokyo, let me say that. But this is also why we break it down, because one thing is like if you just measure the city and say, okay, how does it look all in all? Well, then it's going to be the same cities all over again that have the major modal share, the major big bike culture. They're going to rank high all the time, but you don't notice all the rise of this, like the small risers, but the fast movers that really do a really amazing job. And this is what we get credit for too. And this is why I think the index is interesting, because it will be changing for every year, I think. Okay, the bike share program is, for example, where Copenhagen ranks pretty fucking low right now because it's so bad. But we are getting a new system, so maybe we'll win on this next time. The bike share programs are the new black of the bicycle world. And with good reasons, because some of these cities really have made an incredible success by implementing these. And here it is that it's the uprising small cities that really get some credit. In Barcelona, for example, when they implemented their bike share program, has gone from almost nothing to that every third bike you see in the city landscape is a red Bissing bicycle. In Paris, almost 70,000 people go by a Velib bike every single day. And in Dublin, when they started their bike share program in 2009, they were hoping, they were really hoping, but they thought it might not happen, but they hoped, for 2,500 users of their bike share program. Within 10 months, they had 37,000 users. The gender split, I think, is an interesting one. And Rachel was talking a little about it too, that these women are really the indicator species of a good bicycle culture. It's the result of many studies that a high percentage of women cyclists goes hand in hand with the sitting being convenient, comfortable, and safe. So our criterion here is going from 0 from an overwhelmingly male to 4 points for an even gender split or even better. More women than men. And where do you see that right now? You see that in Amsterdam and you see that in Copenhagen. But it also comes to show that the top 10 cities of the index, they all have at least 30 to 40% women cyclists. So they have a pretty even gender split. So I know this next slide is going to be, so I'm just going to jump over. The modal share for cyclists. Here we're looking at the percentage of travelers using the bike. That's what modal share means. And it's one of the obvious ones. We rate from under 1% to over 25%. And of course, the gold medal goes to Amsterdam. We rated the increase from under 1% to 5+%. And this is, for example, Barcelona's time to shine. They've gone from almost no cyclists to a city where there's almost always a cyclist in sight. Whoop. The perception of safety. We've been rating the perception of safety by taking a look at the cyclists themselves and what they're wearing on their heads. If the percentage of cyclists wearing helmets is high, we see that as a sign of a city being perceived as unsafe for cyclists. Therefore, we've given 0 points to cities with mandatory helmet laws and constant promotion of helmets. And we've given 4 points to cities with less than 20% of cyclists wearing helmets. And this is a touchy subject. And the helmet debate is a long and ongoing debate. And I won't talk much more about it, but just mention the statistical fact that the safest place to ride your bike in Europe is where they ride with their kids like this, and there's barely a helmet to be seen. It's the Netherlands. Also, if you're interested in this subject, I brought some brochures that you're welcome to take. that they discuss this issue a little more.
One question.
Yeah?
May I ask you?
Yeah?
Do you have some scientific background for this thesis? Because it's hard for me to understand. Okay, I refer to that, but
Yep.
maybe there are also some cultural differences in countries to wear helmets or to wear hats or whatever,
Mm.
which has no influence at all on bicycling, on safety in bicycling.
I couldn't really hear that, but I'm sure you're right.
No, I just said that in the law, it's like in Holland, it's made in such a way that if there's an accident, biker is always right, and they are protected by law. So I know
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
is indeed quite safe, and the cars are really really careful with the bikers because they know this that if they hit them, they always will be.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, you'll hear people say that there are scientific facts for one side and people from the other side. You'll hear both voices, and there's a lot of rappling going on. This is our stand, and the thing is that one thing that is sure is that the higher percentage of cyclists you have, the safer it is for the single cyclist. And the thing is, and it's our belief, that if you keep saying that you should wear a helmet, you're sending a signal that this is unsafe, and this is when people will stop using bicycles. If they stop using bicycles because they think it's unsafe, then it's getting unsafe for the cyclist in general. But there's also a pursuer here. Next, politics. When it comes to politics, we rated the political climate regarding urban cycling. And we've been rating it from a non-existence to an active political involvement. And here New York scored some points because of this woman, Shanette Sadiq Khan. I have a really hard time saying her name. But she's the commissioner of the New York Transportation Department. And she has done an incredible job rethinking New York and making it more livable. And there's still a long way to go, but she's definitely one of the people that are pushing it. With urban planning, we're looking at if the city thinks cyclists and pedestrian first or not. And if they're well informed about best practices from the world. Portland has scored some bonus points in that one because they're really trying to match the best international, the best practice infrastructure and trying to match it to their city. This 12th category, we look how drivers and the community at large regard urban cyclists. And here, for example, Berlin, I think, is doing a really great job because maybe you don't have a cycle lane or a bicycle track all over the place, but you feel respected by the cars, I think. This is a picture from the bicycle superhighway in London, and I think the picture speaks for itself. The 13th and last criterion is traffic calming. Yeah?
One last question. Can you go back to the last point, social acceptance?
Uh-huh.
How do you measure this? Because this is a very individual experience of each and everyone, and me as a citizen of Berlin, I would really doubt that when you say the social acceptance of bikers in Berlin is very high.
You don't think it's high?
No, every morning I commute to work.
Yeah.
I always hear the cars going
Honking.
on their horns
Yeah.
when I ride the bicycle lanes, because the legal regulations are not very well known. For example, you're not enforced to ride on a bicycle lane, which is not very well known by car riders. And there are lots of people who ride on the streets and think that car drivers would respect that, but they don't. So this point is a very individual
Yeah,
experience.
definitely.
How do you measure this?
Well, this is again where we've been talking with different people from the cities and their experiences, as well as our own experiences from when we have been biking around. And I will say that maybe you don't feel accepted, but it's a hell lot better here than it is in a lot of other cities. So yes, it is an individual, and you can feel different about it. And maybe there's one route where car drivers are particularly annoying or annoyed by you. But overall, this is of course, a general. But it's also like how much in the media, how much is this discussed? But when you see this, for example, I think it kind of speaks for itself. Where was I? Traffic calming. Yeah. Traffic calming has a tremendous effect on the safety of cyclists and pedestrians, and therefore we of course have rated that high. And again, Barcelona is a great example. They have a vision of making 80% of their city to 30 kilometers an hour zones. Also, Helsinki are really on the move on this one. So these were the 13 criteria. And now I'm going to be talking a little more about Berlin. And I'm not going to walk you through the same 13 criteria again. I'm going to boil it down to 4 keys from the Copenhagenize toolbox and discuss it from that. The first key, and definitely the most important one, is to think A to Bism. It's simple human nature that you want to get from point A to point B as fast and easy as possible. And what could really piss off a Homo sapien is if the trip from point A to point B has been made difficult or confusing. It's definitely impressive that Berlin has close to 900 kilometers of bicycle infrastructure. And this is something we've been given good credit for. However, the network is not necessarily the most logical one. Sometimes you have to be with the buses. Sometimes you have to be with the pedestrians. Sometimes you have to be with the cars, and sometimes you might have some space for yourself. It seems like Berlin thinks that the bicycle user is more clever and has a higher tolerance of challenge than any of the other road users. And as a cyclist, I guess I'm kind of flattered about that. But at the end of the day, we know that that's not true. Cyclists are just as lazy and stupid as everybody else. We want something that's logical and easy to relate to. Let me tell you an example from Denmark, for example. As a Danish cyclist, you always know where you belong. In between the pedestrians and the car drivers, the right side of the road. Normally you have a separated cycle track, separated from the pedestrians as well as the road. But if there isn't a cycle track, you still know where you belong. On the right side of the road, in between the pedestrians and the car drivers. And God forbid you ever ride on the sidewalk. In Denmark, and especially in Copenhagen, there's been made infrastructure that doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to figure out, and it works. Another thing I think is interesting to look at when it comes to Berlin is your amazing public transportation system. And with Berlin being a big city with a high modal share, around 13%, and in the smaller neighborhoods is up to 20 to 25%. That is really amazing. But when Berlin is so big, I think it's interesting to look at long-distance rides and especially focus on seamless transport, mixing the bike with public transportation. Already you can take your bike on public transportation, and it's definitely possible, and it's free sometimes. Nobody really knows. It seems very confusing. But I think it's time for Berlin to go all the way. To begin with, I think you should make some ramps for this poor feller so he doesn't have to carry his bike all the way up the stairs himself. But you could also think bigger. Why not make it completely free to take your bike on long-distance public transportation? Again, let me come with an example from Copenhagen. I'm from Copenhagenize. Do you see there's like a, yeah. In 2010, the Copenhagen S-Train company decided to make it completely free for everybody, everywhere, no matter when. It's free to take your bike on the S-Train. And within 2 years, they had more than tripled the number of passengers taking their bike with them on these trains. Also, this has been the single most effective marketing initiative that this company has ever made. In 2011, they had 3 million extra passengers, with or without bikes, than the year before. Thinking A to Bism is can not only lead to more cyclists, but it can also lead to big bucks. It did for this company. The second key is to apply very basic marketing techniques to urban cycling. And it can seem very simple that when you try to promote a behavior, to sell an idea or a product, you want to tell the good things about it. Like this beer company, for example. They are selling their product as fun, as easy, enjoyable, social, special but mainstream, and something that gives you a jolly good time. This is how they get people to buy and love their product. Not by telling the other side of the story. Urban cycling is an even better product. It's a product that not only benefits the user, but it's a solution for some of society's biggest problems, like pollution, obesity, congested cities. And it's fun, enjoyable, social, and gives you a jolly good time. The health benefits alone are 10 times higher than the risk of fatal injuries. And still, fuck, there it is. Oh, was it? Yeah. And still, this is how cycling is being portrayed over and over again. This has to change. I mean, your great-grandfathers had it figured out. Cycling needs a simple, mainstream hero brand. Cycling should be branded like something you do because you're worth it, because you're loving it. And what you want to say to all your friends is, just do it. Which leads me to the third key. Stop ignoring the bull in society's china shop. So many other cities, Berlin wants to become more livable. And this means more pedestrians and cyclists and less car driving. The logical step when building bicycle infrastructure to make more cyclists and less car driving is to build bicycle infrastructure where the car normally is. Taking the space from the car and making it into a bicycle track. Instead, this is all too often what you see in Berlin, for example. And I don't understand that if you want to make more pedestrians and more cyclists, why are you stealing the space from the pedestrians? Because the last thing you want is war. And let me quote ADFC spokesman, who said, "There are not too many accidents, but the feeling of security for pedestrians suffers from cyclists on the sidewalk. It's always a topic in the news." Well, with an infrastructure taking space from the pedestrian, Berlin has trained the cyclists to try and fit in where the cyclists shouldn't fit in. And for that, Berlin is taking a risk of the cyclists being hated by everyone and the pedestrians feeling insecure. So when you take space from the sidewalks instead of the roads, you make life harder for the most valuable people of a livable city, namely the pedestrians and the cyclists. And you ensure that no car driver will risk his easy commute on the road to become vulnerable and constantly having to fight for his right in the city space. So fix what's broken, not what works, and restrict what kills, not what saves lives. The fourth and the last key is to re-democratize cycling. And here many cities are struggling with the fact that cycling is being perceived as difficult, expensive, dangerous, sweaty, and subcultural. These are pictures from Berlin. This is not your problem. You got it. Use it. Thank you. Yeah. I don't. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Any questions or? Yeah?
The index, because I imagine you didn't study the whole cities in the world. But how did you choose the cities you were going to study and talk to town planners and study all the experiments? And secondly, I was a bit surprised to see London as one of the most cycling-friendly cities. I'm pretty much familiarized with the case, and I'm really shocked. So could you explain me a little bit why is it there?
Yeah. The first one, how did we pick the cities? We said 80 cities, which means that we made some choices. For example, we didn't take all the major cities of US, for example, because there are so many of them. We took almost nothing from Asia, which is kind of weird too, because if there's any place they're really cycling, it's Asia. But we don't have any connections there, and we don't have any info. We don't really have any statistics or anything, so it's hard to rate. So of course, we've been picking like that. Hopefully the next index will have even more cities. We are hoping for 200, but it takes a long time to do this rating, so let's see what's going to happen. So we rated the cities that we actually had some information on, basically. And this is what you can think is also, what this index can maybe do, is that this got a lot of attention, and there was a lot of cities thinking, why are we not in this index? And it's really been getting some attention from the politicians too. And it started to create this like effect of people saying, okay, this is something we really want to live up to, and we can prove that we can be better. So it started a good attitude, especially from the politicians. London. Why is London rated as the top 15th city, right? Well, again, as I said earlier, this is not only an index that is rating like the heavyweight bicycle-friendly cities, you know what I mean, like with a high modal share. It's also an index with these jokers where we give bonus points if there's something amazingly happening. What is going on in London right now, I think, is very interesting. Also how the Times is really doing a campaign that is starting to stop ignoring the bull and start actually focusing on the problems, namely the heavy traffic. So London has definitely become gotten into this index because of the amazing work that is being done right now. Not because they have amazing infrastructure, not because they have a high modal share, because we all know that's not right. But they're doing something right now, and that's what they're getting credit for.
Hi, I'm from Brisbane in Australia, and obviously we didn't see any Australian cities on there, and I imagine that's our helmet laws.
Yeah, it has something to do with it, yeah.
Yes, just a little bit. Do you have any suggestions for how we could change that? It's sort of instilled quite a bit with our government, and you know, as much as there are campaigns and there are people, it's very much a minority. But it's happening a lot in our media where there's discussions, but it seems to be safety, safety, safety.
Yeah.
Seems to overwhelm.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can give any more good ideas other than that you need to keep talking about it. And there simply needs to be some kind of logic to this discussion. Also because there's just as many head injuries and actually even more of pedestrians than cyclists. And you would never ask a pedestrian to put on a helmet. And it's just getting to the point where safety is just like, it's really hard to argue against safety. It really is. But the thing is that life is dangerous, and I've never heard about anyone surviving yet. So maybe we should take a little more and go back to what we actually want to focus on, and like make the surroundings safer. Don't always blame the victim for not making it safe enough for themselves. So I'm sorry I don't have the, if I did, I would be talking to the politicians right now, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for a very colorful and energizing presentation, first of all.
Yes. Thank you.
My question, looking out on the other side of the curtains, is how does it come that the rainiest capital in Europe is on the top of your list? So what is the influence of weather on urban biking in your experience?
Well, that's a really, really interesting question. Because my experience, I wish I had a picture. I don't. There's some pictures. By the way, there's a Cycle Chic book, both in English and German, and there are some pictures of people biking in snowstorms. And so that was the clue for that. My experience is that the weather is an excuse that doesn't really make sense. Because, for example, in Umeå, the Swedish, are there any Swedes here? Umeå. Are you Swedish? Yeah. Oh, good, great. There's a bicycle culture more impressive than Stockholm, I think. And it's even more north. It's like 400 kilometers more north or something. And why is that? Well, it's because they in that city are really, really doing something. They're always clearing the streets, and you see like high piles of snow on the sides, and people use it because it's still easier for them to use a bike on these short trips. So, no, so far the weather, I don't believe, has the same big influence as many people think. Yeah.
How do you see the...
Oh. Sorry? Oh, need a microphone. Okay.
That's fine.
How do you see the influence of the fashion industry, just to come back to Cycle Chic, how do you see the influence of the fashion industry to push bicycling into the mainstream culture, to make cycling to work more interesting for people who are still not thinking about riding a bike? It's because I see more and more fashion stores, even here in Berlin, trying even to sell bikes, to put bikes between their clothes and to jump on the train.
Yeah.
Because political regulations or trying to help people to ride their bikes is might be one way. How do you see this trend maybe?
Well, I think it's happening everywhere, and I think it's a fantastic trend because it's becoming this accessory, but again, it's all about how it's being portrayed too, right? If it's something that this is only nice because it matched my watch, it's maybe not the right attitude, but making it as a part of something that you always will use, just how you're always going to use your purse or something, you're always going to use your jacket. That, I think, is a really good idea. And Cycle Chic has been doing also fashion projects with different companies. So, yeah, we definitely approve that. Yeah.
Okay, we've probably just got time for one more question.
Yeah.
I also have a question about the bicycle culture.
Yeah.
I think it's a central thing here in Berlin that there's some kind of a war between cars and bicycle people. That's the main thing. The infrastructure and things. It's okay. It's all right. But how do you think this cultural change, making it mainstream without all this fashionable blah blah? How do you think this mainstream change will happen? And what's the major thing that needs to be done? The cultural change.
The cultural change? Well, first of all, as I ended up telling you, is that I think Berlin got it already. You got the right attitude, and you got I couldn't. Yeah, but I showed some pictures. But I took some pictures yesterday also. It's everybody. It's not a single kind of group. It's not a subculture bicycling here. It's all kinds of people. old and young and female, male, income-wise or whatever, you can see like it's not. So I think you got it. And I'm not really sure. I mean, you say that there's a war going on. There's always a war going on. There's a war going on in Copenhagen too. I mean, you know, you hear that often, like, oh, those goddamn cyclists, like, they're just typical, and they're just like, this culture is like terrible. And it continues, and it's, I think one thing is like maybe I would hope that sometimes the media's had a little more responsibility of thinking how they're going to, like, they've projected up as like, we have the most terrible cyclists in Copenhagen in the whole world. There's nobody, and then when people come from outside and they come and see, they find, well, you drive perfectly, like you're always on the right side, and you know, sometimes you're on the sidewalk, but it's, you know, so it's sometimes maybe to ease down, like put some cold water on this heated asses, and stop, simply just ease it out a little, and stop also. You know, that whole, I'm for example myself, critical mass, I think the idea is interesting, but I think the attitude sometimes is wrong, like burn the cars, out of the city, we can't live together, and we should have completely car-free cities. I'm not in for that. I think you should live in harmony, but of course, if you keep saying that it's the cyclists and the pedestrians that are the problem, yeah, you can't get more livability. You should, of course, say that we do not want any more cars, we want less cars, but we're not going to hate you and burn you forever in eternity. So, yeah, attitude, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sidsel, for that. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.